let me introduce you to the most dangerous plane that Stanley ever made, the 239. This may look like an unassuming, basic little grooving plane, but things are not always what they seem. Stanley called it the Special Dado Plane. That makes it sound somewhat cute and unassuming, but the other name it went by kind of makes you scratch your head. The Wire Housing Plane, or the Wire Molding Plane. To many of us in the hand tool world, anything with electrical is somewhat scary. But this is a hand plane that lives in the electrical world. And its use may seem a bit confusing to us now today. So let me take you back to the 1910s when this was first made. Fires were an all too common occurrence due to houses being lit by fire, heated by fire. There were fires in every house, and it's amazing that more of them didn't burn down. But along came Edison and he said, I've got an idea. The problem was you had to run wires to all of your lights. You had to run two wires. You needed a neutral and you needed a hot. We didn't care about grounds just yet. And if you've ever worked with lath and plaster, you'd know how hard it is to run wires to all of the lights you would want back to the light switch and then to the generator in a house that's already made. It would be kind of difficult to run these all over the place when all of the walls are sealed and you have lath and plaster you have to work with. Nowadays we have conduit you can actually just attach onto the outside of a wall and run your wire around. I even do some of that in my own shop. But the problem was you needed to keep the wires separate. Yes, many of them were protected and insulated, but some wires were actually run bare. So some installers would actually create molding that would have channels in it that the wires could run through. And that's where Stanley hopped in and said, hey, we can fix that. We'll make the 239. Yeah, Stanley made a woodworking tool for electricians. How is this a bad plan? It's basically a grooving or a dado plane that can be used to cut grooves in thin pieces of wood. You could then house your wire in this molding and keep your hot wire separate from your neutral wire. And then you make another piece of wood that just goes over it to cap it, and you get this little decorative piece that you could run anywhere around a wall. Now they would look far more decorative than this. I've seen some of them with detailed carving running all the way up the trim work. But even if I were to carve this and make it look really pretty, it doesn't hide what's inside. And I hope you can see the problem with this. It was considered safer than having fire on every wall, but there's a reason we frown at knob and tube electrical nowadays. But let's take a little closer look at this thing. To those of you who know the 238, it looks very, very similar. My particular one is missing the nicking blade. It's also been repaired and needs to be repaired. But the fence rides off of the left side on the two rails, much like a 45 or 55, and in here you can actually see the cutting blade. There would have been another blade coming down from here that looks much like this. I'll show you a picture. And on the bottom of that, there's actually two nickers that would stick out on either side of this. Rather than having them embedded into the side of the plane, they just made a separate iron that they would ride in. And those would score the wood on either side of the iron in front of the iron. The blade is one of the hardest that Stanley made to replace. You actually have to take these two screws all the way out, and you hope that the two screws and washers don't run away while you take this over to your sharpening stones. Here's a closer look at it, and it's basically just a cutting iron, except for rather than being on the side, it's on the edge. And here you can even see it's a Stanley Sweetheart. Some will tell you this is a finger hole for your index finger, but in this case, your finger still goes back here. This is where your second hand goes and allows you to ride in the front. Much like with a saw, this finger doesn't go in the hole, it rides up here, and then your thumb comes forward to give you that second hand for pushing. Stanley made a surprising amount of these. There was a huge boom going on. Everyone was wanting to electrify their houses because it was much safer than having fire. But by the time World War II came around, these basically disappeared because then everyone was building new houses after the war, and when you built new houses, you didn't need to do this. You could just run the wiring in the wall and keep it a little bit more protected. Can't you just see the quality of someone wanting to work on this in the future and sticking a screwdriver in there trying to pry this apart, and oh no, the screwdriver slid across both wires, energizing the screwdriver, causing sparks, and it's in a confined space covered with wood. Yeah, look Mom, I made a fire starter. There's a reason Stanley only made these for a little over 2 decades. Yeah, they had their place and they did interesting things, but really there aren't many places for this. If I need to cut a groove or a dado, I've got other planes that do this far better. And I don't really want to be reminded of the fire risk that comes when woodworkers and electricians get together. So I hope you like this interesting look at the Stanley 239, a really odd little plane that had a place in history that we're all kind of happy isn't around anymore. But I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas. There are a few other things I could have talked into this, and I would love to actually one of these days show the 238. Very similar plane, but used for weather stripping, and actually something that you could still use today if you're doing window and door restoration, but not the 239. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, side remarks, thank you. Put those down below. That really helps out the channel. Anytime you like, comment, share, subscribe, you've heard it 100 times before, but really it does help out the channel. And honestly, I like reading anytime someone puts a comment down there. Even the people who just put comment down below, or CDB. Thank you. That really means a lot, and I do love reading those, and I answer as many of the questions as I can get to. So let me know your thoughts down there. But if you really want to go even farther, a bunch of names scrolling over here, those are some of the fantastic, wonderful, benevolent, gorgeous people over on Patreon. The type of people you'd know would never use a 239. They are the ones supporting this channel. They're the ones who allow me to do what I want to do and be able to buy interesting tools and tell some of the old history that went with them. Thank you. Without you guys, we would not be here. If you'd like to help out with Patreon, then links down below, you know what to do. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Hey, I've got a great idea. Let's facilitate some electrical fires. We'll call it the fireworks plane. Let's put bare wires in a wooden housing and then drive a nail through it and hope we don't hit them when we attach it to the wall. 7 reasons why this is an interesting plane. Stay tuned for the last one. Number 7 might shock you.